Hey everyone, I'm Carolyn. If anybody could let me know in the chat that you can hear me and see me, and once I get confirmation, I might just give it 1 minute to see if anybody else is going to join, and then we will jump right in to this session. Awesome. Thank you, Andrew. Sweet. So, oh, perfect. Thank you, Shells. So I am Carolyn. I'm going to have a bit more of an introduction in a couple slides, but just for anybody who is here on time while we wait for a few more people to join. I'm really excited to talk to you today about discovering free hidden campsites. This is a subject I love talking about, especially to people who I meet on the road, because it opens up so much for all of us who love exploring and love getting out there. But there's also a ton of responsibility that comes with getting out into nature and using our public lands responsibly. So, yeah, I'm so excited. Okay, somebody says that it looks like I might be like a little bit fuzzy, so let me know if anything like that happens. My Wi-Fi here isn't amazing, but hopefully if anything happens, there will be a recording afterwards, so fingers crossed. All right. So, all right, we're a couple minutes in. I think we can just jump in here, and also please feel free to add questions throughout the chat. I'll try to take note of them and answer in real time. If I don't happen to see it or something like that, please at the end I'm gonna have a little bit of a Q&A, so just hold on to them as well. Okay, so before I get into any introductions or anything like that, I really want to start with the two sides of free camping. Oh, and I just saw Rhonda's here from New Jersey. I'm actually in Massachusetts right now, so and somebody is here from Vermont. I'm excited to talk to you about free camping because it's a bit of an enigma out here on the East Coast. But yes, okay. So just jumping into the two sides of free camping, I want to give you a full picture of the reality of free camping so we know what we're getting ourselves into. Okay, so here's a few examples of free campsites that I've stayed at. So over the past 2 years, I've stayed at this beautiful campsite in Big Bend, completely free. That's us on the Rio Grande. This is another free campsite very close to Zion National Park in Utah. Very beautiful views. And this is another one down in Baja, Mexico, another beautiful one right on the beach. And I realized this morning that I was only including desert campsites, so I added one from Idaho from this summer. And again, another free campsite. So with that said, let's look at the other side of things. This is also what free campsites can look like and often do look like on the road. If you've ever followed people who are doing van life or really looked into it, a lot of times these campsites can get pretty crowded, especially if they are near a national park, a city, things like that. This is also what it can look like. I have seen things like this very often where people tend to crowd into one area, and sometimes that can create some problems like, here we go. Campsites getting trashed. We're going to talk more about this in this session, but I really just wanted to start off with this because while I was promoting this, I had some other friends in the van life community just remind me how important it is that when we have these conversations and we're educating each other on free camping and getting out into the wilderness, it is all of our responsibilities to be caretakers for our public land and ensure that all of us, all of our friends, family, everybody we love in this world, the next generation can use these public lands the same way that we are. And there's a bit of a big issue happening right now in the van life community where we're seeing areas get shut down. So this is really important to keep in mind throughout this presentation that I personally have seen many places look like this. Trash everywhere, trash in the fire pit. And only in the 2 years that I've been on the road, I've already seen several popular camping areas that are well known be shut down because very simply, whoever the officials are that are in charge of these areas just can't handle it. So that's why I'm really excited about sharing this presentation, because it's not only about like, hey, here are some apps and stuff that you can use to find free campsites really easily. It's more about, here is how I can show you to use all the tools that are out there and use your time and energy to go out and explore and go on an adventure and say, no, I don't need to stop at these very overcrowded areas that I don't necessarily need to add to the issue. I can go out on my own and I can find these more isolated spots that I've grown to really love. And I think you will too. So, with that said, we've already got to know each other a little bit, but just so you can understand a bit more about me and where I'm coming from. So, I'm Carolyn. This is my 1992 Toyota Hilux Galaxy. I have been traveling on the road full time for the past 2 years with my partner Zach and our dog Willie Nelson. So this is a 30-year-old Japanese rig. We did a little bit of renovation to it before we hit the road. But a big part of why we even wanted to hit the road in the first place is like we had this dream for so long. And then back in 2020, I don't know if y'all remember, during the pandemic, a lot of people were adopting dogs. maybe not doing quite enough research when they're adopting these dogs. I was very much, admittedly, one of those people. I wanted to get a dog, and I came across a listing for a dog that I would have to adopt sight unseen, but it seemed great. I wanted an adventure dog to go on hikes with, and I adopted my dog, Willie. So this is me and Zach, and you can see Willie on a couple of these. So he's a great dog. I've grown to love him. I've had him for 3 years now. But when we first adopted him, it was very clear to us that he had some big problems that were deeply rooted in fear and anxiety. So immediately he was showing aggressive signs to other dogs, to strangers that he wasn't, comfortable with. It takes a long time to introduce him to people. And it just made the situation really insane. So when we hit the road, we were really excited to go out west because we're from Massachusetts. It's very crowded here. It's hard to find even a hiking trail where you're not just inundated with a bunch of off-leash dogs and all this other stuff. So when we got out west, our main priority was really to be alone all the time, which has pushed me to become an expert of finding these free campsites, but not at these more crowded areas, but really getting off the beaten path and having big adventures every time we move to a different spot and just getting out and getting alone. So it's been really fun. And I kind of want to share how I do that. Also, just to plug my social media, if anybody wants to, I spend an embarrassing amount of time on my social platforms. I love making videos. It's a really awesome creative outlet for me. So if you're into van life and you want to follow along, please come along for the ride. Say hi in the comments, whatever like that. But yeah, my handle is @galaxy.tripping. Okay, so yeah, just reiterating the goal of this guide, we've already said it's to empower you with all the tools you need to get out there. Okay, table of contents. So this is the whole shebang. We are going to start with what even is free camping, because especially, I know a few of you have already said you're from the East Coast. We have Sandwich, Massachusetts. You may not even really have a big familiarity with free camping. When I downloaded TikTok out of pure desperation and boredom during the pandemic, that was the first time I started seeing videos of people saying, hey, this is my free campsite, look it up. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I paid $30 to camp here in Massachusetts and New Hampshire. So I'm confused. So we're going to kind of go into what free camping is and how you find these. Next, we're going to talk about our public land. This is a huge step in the process of being able to responsibly find free campsites. You're going to really want to get familiar with the public land in your area, different types of public land, the rules, regulations, all of this other stuff. So that's a big step. Number 3, we're going to quickly run through Leave No Trace. I just want to make sure we get that in there. I know Andrew also already noted that in the comments section. It's just a really important part of finding these free campsites, and I just want to give you a little bit of an introduction there. Number 4, we'll go into the tools and techniques that you can use to start adventuring and start exploring. We're also going to talk about how to prepare and pack so you can do this safely, another big part of off-grid camping. And then finally, I'll share a few final thoughts, and then we can jump into a Q&A. All right, so what even is free camping? Well, there's a few different types of free camping. These 2 at the top are what I'm going to be talking about today. But I'll start at the bottom. So there's backcountry camping. You may have heard of this, especially if you're into hiking. These are opportunities for us to go on trail, go hiking, and then responsibly do some backcountry camping, often with a tent or even just cowboy camping. Not really what I'm going to talk about today, but that is a type of free camping that you can look into. There is also stealth camping. This is another area I'm not going to touch on today just because I'm not really familiar with it, but there are a lot of van lifers out there and city dwellers who will live in their van and more so just do it in a stealthy kind of way. They have a van that can just kind of blend in. I don't know if you've ever seen mine. I don't have a stealth van whatsoever. And I really prefer to get out into nature. But if city living is your thing, definitely do some research into stealth camping. But today we're going to be talking about boondocking / dispersed camping. So these are actually both the same thing. I just want to include these because they're two different terms that you'll see out there. So boondocking is just a blanket term that refers to camping in a self-sufficient manner, going off grid where you're relying on your own resources. You're not getting the normal amenities that a normal campground would offer, but you're off-grid camping. But dispersed camping is another term for that. But I wanted to keep it in there because when you are researching dispersed camping laws and regulations in your area, this is usually the term that like the National Forest or like the BLM Land Management Bureau will use. So that's just helpful to keep in mind. So now what to expect from a free campsite? We'll get into it. And this is, I actually realized this wasn't a free campsite. This is in Arizona and it was a permitted campsite. So I think I paid $12 for a 2-week permit for this one. So, but this is a good example of what a free campsite will look like. It is a clearing with a fire pit and that's pretty much it. But getting into what constitutes a free campsite. So again, limited amenities. And keep in mind, I'm going to show you how to find these. I just want to give you like the full picture. Limited amenities. So like you just saw, a clearing and a fire ring is like 99% of the time what you're going to be looking for when you're out exploring and looking for free camping. Occasionally, I have come across different free camping areas that do offer a pit toilet, picnic tables, and kind of like the campground experience. But I will say, typically you have to get pretty out there to find these. I found a lot of them in the desert of Montana. Funnily enough, just because I think they were trying to attract people who are recreating. First come, first serve. So again, this is the kind of thing we have to think about when we're going out onto these lands. With them being less regulated, you have more freedom, but it also means that you have to be respectful of other campers and you have to be very flexible when you go out there. I've had plenty of times where I go down a forest road and it happens to be on a weekend and it just turns out that it is far too crowded and I've had to spend a couple hours looking for a campsite. Sometimes it takes 5 minutes. It really depends. Seclusion. This is another thing, like I've already said, that I love about free camping is you really can get out there and just be alone, which like in this crazy world today, I think we all often could use a little bit of that. Self-reliance. This is another factor to consider, that there is a higher stakes situation when we are doing free camping and getting out there off grid. You have to come prepared. We'll talk more about that. Wildlife, definitely have had a lot of interesting wildlife encounters over the past 2 years. I've come face to face with wild bulls down in Texas near the border. I had what was likely wolves outside of my campsite one night when I was very much off grid, and a lot of deer. So we'll get a little bit more into that and how you can prepare and just, give the wildlife space. Less regulation. Again, we kind of already talked about that. You have to be very mindful of your presence and leave no trace, because with less regulation, if these places get really popular, the authorities just don't have the means to care for these areas or keep them in order, and then they get shut down. Okay, so now let's talk a little bit about like an introduction to public land, types of public land, and what you can be Googling and researching when you're thinking about going camping on public land. So this is a map of our public land in the United States. And some people have already pointed out what I wanted to see if anybody could notice about this map. That seems a little bit odd. Something's weird here. So drop your thoughts if you want to beat me to it. But yeah, I think it's pretty obvious to all of us, and anybody who really has any sort of knowledge of public land is if you are from the East Coast, there's not a lot going on over here. And it's a bummer. There is public land options out here. I was just, yeah, Andrew says, gotta love living out west, seriously. I was just camping in New Hampshire um, for a couple weeks not too long ago, and I was able to find free camping there. But it does get difficult on the weekends. You do have to be willing to go pretty much out of your way, especially if you live near a busier area on the East Coast. But I'm not saying that it's impossible. I've definitely stayed at some pretty cool free camping areas, kind of just like spotted along the West. You just have to know where to go and how to do it responsibly. But yeah, out west, you can see a lot of different shades of BLM land, national forest land. So getting into that, let's talk about some common types of public land. There are many, 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 many types of public land, but I'm going to go over the most popular ones that I encounter. So we will start off with BLM land. So if this is new to you, Bureau of Land Management lands are a very popular type of public land that you will come across once you hit the road and you're going out west. National forest is probably 50% of the time I'm on BLM land, 50% of the time I'm on national forest land. And then outside of that, there's also state forests, wildlife management areas. A lot of times there's like, I've been on like Arizona state trust land and like Montana recreation land. Like there's a national seashore in Texas. There's so many different types of public land. So it really does require a bit of research, but I'm going to give you some tools that will help you be able to see what sort of public land is in your area very quickly. Okay, so BLM land, this is 243 million acres of public land. All these pictures here are me on BLM land. And just a few quick facts about them. So it's managed by the Department of Interior. This land can be used for hunting, fishing, camping, hiking, like whatever else. Just it's there for recreation, but also other activities are happening on public land, like solar farms, wind farms, livestock grazing, mining, timber harvesting. There may be some like monuments for conserving history. So there's a variety of things you may come across when you're on BLM land. I've got very up close and personal with cows in my day of camping. Also down in Arizona or closer to the border, there's a lot of like border surveillance happening. I've got pretty used to like planes and drones flying pretty low, and then also a lot of military activity, military testing. So I've seen missiles launched and lots of fighter jets and just a variety of all this kind of stuff. So it's interesting to see how we share the land with other activities. And then national forest, like I said, it's kind of 50-50 for me at least. So national forest is 188 million acres of public land for conservation recreation. These are some photos that I've taken at different camping spots within the national forests. Again, very similar philosophy where you can be camping in an area where there's also timber harvesting happening, or there was timber harvesting happening, and now it's been repurposed into more of a solely camping area. And then mining. And yeah, so they're very similar, but they both have their own rules and regulations. And it's also very specific. We'll get into this a little bit more, but just because you're like, okay, at a national forest, usually it's 14-day free camping. You can camp on almost any national forest road. You still have to do research for your specific national forest to understand those rules and regulations. So like I said, we'll dive into that. Okay, so it's almost time to actually learn how to find these free campsites. But first, let's talk about Leave No Trace because of all those pictures we were looking at the beginning. So what is Leave No Trace? Leave No Trace is an ethical framework for outdoor ethics. I definitely recommend, if you haven't really looked into this before, do a quick Google search, get yourself familiar with what you can do to make sure that you are leaving no trace. And it's just a very important practice that minimizes the human impact on the environment so that these places can stay open and animals can stay safe, and all of this can just remain an option for future generations. So yeah, again, this is just one of the many articles that you'll find if you Google like the end of dispersed camping or um, overcrowded public lands. There are a lot of these areas that are getting closed due to high traffic and bad camping etiquette. So here are a few things for Leave No Trace. Plan ahead. So you're always going to want to research these public land regulations beforehand. So when we get into how you can find these public lands and understand where you are, the next step is going to be like, say, I was in the White Mountains of New Hampshire last week. When I said, okay, I want to go camping in the White Mountain National Forest, I spent a good hour on the National Forest website for the White Mountain National Forest to understand where I could camp, more importantly, where I couldn't camp, what kind of, if statements are going on in the area, if there's a fire ban, if there is like an algae advisory. Like there's a lot of different things you have to take into consideration, especially since in the White Mountain National Forest, since it's a higher traffic area, they have designated free campsites that are numbered. So that's another thing you have to look for is like, do I have to be looking for a number? Is it pretty much anywhere that has like a fire ring already established? And just get an idea, and then also seeing how long can I camp on the public land. Sometimes it's 14 days, sometimes it's 7 days, sometimes it's 3 days. It can be anything. So these are all things that you have to research. Leave no trace, travel and camp on durable surfaces. If you have a 4-wheel drive vehicle like we do, we are very mindful not to go take it on an ATV trail. Make sure that we are on actual motorized vehicle trails so that we're not unnecessarily hurting the environment. And again, something that not everybody follows, but we really try to and can really help with some of the issues that we're seeing is only camp at established campsites. So I promise you there's not a shortage of them if you actually go looking for them of these. And what you're looking for again is a clearing with a fire pit. So we're not going and saying, hey, you know what, I'm just going to pull my van or my RV over a couple small bushes and I'm just going to like make this little thing on the side of the road my campsite because I like the spot. Don't do that. There's no need to trample on vegetation for no reason when there are so many opportunities out there. This is a big one for Leave No Trace. I won't get too much into this, but I definitely encourage you to look into how you would want to handle all of this. So you're going to want to dispose of your waste properly, which means packing out all trash, all of your leftover food. Don't throw your food into the woods. This is a big thing that I'm visiting home right now, and I notice like there's just people in my life who would do something like throw like bread into the woods or something, and it's just like, don't do that. I know that it feels like you're feeding the wildlife and it's not that big of a deal because it's biodegradable, but if you look into Leave No Trace, you see that a big part of it is understanding that we shouldn't be leaving any food that we're consuming or leftover food or whatever in the environment that we're traveling in, because our food, human food, comes from all over the world. First of all, I mean, I'm having bananas and avocados from Mexico. It's like, it's just not good practice to leave your waste out there. You want to leave the animals to just live in their environment, find their own food, and not change anything. And then in addition to picking up your own trash, a big thing that I love about the van life community is the just leaving a place better than you find it. A big part of like when we get to a new campsite, part of our setup process is going around with a plastic bag or a trash bag and picking up the campsite, because oftentimes, even when we're really out there, you do find beer cans, you find stuff, people just like throw their trash in the fire pit. When we go walking on the forest road or the BLM road, when we're walking our dog, we take a bag to just pick up whatever's on the side of the road. That's truly the best thing you can do to help with this larger problem. Is it doesn't take a lot of time. But I will warn you, there have been times where we have had to pack out a stove, a microwave, a fridge. It's just kind of the reality of what happens. And there's only so much you can do. But whenever you can, try to take a little bit of the load off of the waste issue we're seeing with these places. That's the best you can do. And then, of course, going to the bathroom out in nature. This is a big thing. Look up Leave No Trace waste disposal methods for going to the bathroom. I have a bathroom in my RV, and I find that is the easiest method for me. I have a cassette toilet. It still means that I have to dispose of the cassette toilet. However, there are people who are digging cat holes, using wag bags. So definitely look into that, because that's also a big problem, is that when these areas are seeing too much high traffic and there's cat holes everywhere and people aren't taking care of their waste, things get bad very quickly. Yes, a shovel is your friend. Very true. Minimize campfire impact. I know somebody already pointed out, look up fire bans. Very important. It's very kind of concerning to me how many times we've seen fires that weren't really put all the way out, or we've seen fires happening when there is a fire ban. And recently, this summer out in Idaho, it was like July. There wasn't a fire ban at the time, but we were driving down a forest road where there really wasn't that many people. The campfire was right on the river, and somebody left their campfire blazing. Like, they tried to put it out by putting rocks on it, but that is not how you put a fire out. And it was so disappointing, because it's like, you're right on the river. So, yeah, like Andrew said, you can call them in, or drain them yourself if you have enough water, which is what we do. We've always had enough water to do that. So always just make sure that your fires are drowned out if you are able to have them, and no reason to go overboard with fires. Just have what fits in the fire bit, and that is the best thing you can do. Okay, so respecting wildlife, we already talked about that a little bit. When you're camping out in these places, you absolutely will see a lot of wildlife, because you're in their territory. This is one of the areas that they still have in our country that is wide open, that they're able to exist without, I'm in suburbia right now, so we know that wildlife do get pushed out of these areas. So we want to make sure we're not encroaching on their space any further. So observe them from a distance, never feed the animals. That is very important. At national parks, there's always signs everywhere saying, like, please don't feed the squirrels, because they end up becoming dependent on humans. And then there are also issues if you're feeding the deer or the elk or those squirrels or whatever, there ends up being issues of, animals can be biting you. It's just, give them their space. And then also look into how to store your food properly. If you're camping in a car, RV, van, whatever, usually that means keeping it inside of the vehicle. But if you're tent camping, you can be sure to look up other ways for, like, bear canisters and stuff like that. Yeah, so be considerate. Another big part of Leave No Trace and just camping on public lands. Such a huge part of these things, especially in more crowded areas, when there are conflicts between humans or people who are, like, upset that you took their spot or whatever. It's like, you always have to err on the side of caution and kindness. So when you're not at a campground where somebody's saying, like, hey, this campsite, turn off your music, it's 10 p.m. There's been a lot of times where we've kind of just had to, like, put up with noise and decide to move the next day, if anything like that did happen. So just give each other space, don't start conflict, and just remember that that's part of the deal with free camping. All right, that's me with my little app. We're going to talk about some tools and techniques. And I just want, when we get into this part of the session, for you to keep everything we've already learned in mind. So what kind of tools are we using to find free campsites? So number one are campsite apps. If you Google how to find free campsites, this is probably the first thing that'll come up. There's quite a few community curated apps out there. But there's been a lot of talk lately about the big problems that come with these apps, because it takes the need for people to get out and explore on their own off the table. And that's how a lot of these more popular areas, where it's like suddenly you see, oh, on this app, I see that there's a river here and it's close to the city. So, like, that's perfect. And that's how people end up really flocking to that one area, and then it becomes over trafficked, and that's where issues happen. So I'm going to go through these and we'll give them the names of the ones that I like to use. But I just want you to remember that these are not an end-all be-all solution. But what's next that I am really excited to show you, and what really changed the game for me, is different public land apps. There are apps now that exist where over your the normal like map you would use on your phone, you can see the boundaries and the different types of public land that exist as far as national forest, BLM land, and you can get the information on what national forest is it, what section of BLM land is it, and then you can further do your research. And this is what I really love to use. I very rarely rely on the campsite apps anymore because I honestly find better campsites going on my own. And I think that this is something that can really change the game for a lot of people. So yeah, like I said, public land websites, that's where you can find the regulations and do a little bit more research. And then also calling ahead and like getting out there into the world. One of my favorite things to do is stop by Forest Service headquarters for whatever area I'm in. I found some really cool campsites that way, because if you go in and you're nice and friendly, these people who work at these resources are there to help, and there to help you experience and recreate. And they're usually pretty willing to give you a couple good spots. Okay, so again, starting with campsite apps. This is visually what these apps will look like. So I'm about to get into them a bit more, but if you just want to have a quick look, if you've never looked at one of these before, again, you have a map. And these different icons they represent campsites. So there's campsites on here that are free. There's also paid campgrounds marked on here, but you can also find different things like water services, dump stations, showers, different things like that. So that's a kind of a cool part of that resource. Okay, so I gave you my 5 free campsite apps that I have used before. There are more out there if you want to ask your friends, if you want to do some Googling, but these are the 5 that I've actually used. I didn't want to include any more. The number one that I like to use, I just find it to be pretty comprehensive, and everything I need is iOverlander. So these are some screenshots I took of iOverlander. Basically, the way that they're represented is on those apps that I just showed you is these little moon signs that you can see off to the right, off to the left. I think it's left. So when I really enjoyed using this before I started van life, when I was trying to get an idea of what public land campsites even looked like, or kind of like visualizing it. It was fun for me to kind of like start dreaming and like going to my couch after dinner and just like pressing on all these different moon signs in Idaho and Oregon and Washington and Arizona and Utah, and just getting an idea of the places that were possible to go. So that's something fun that you can do now if you're like hoping to do van life someday. And then there are other sites that are similar: freecampsites.net, Seeker, Campendium, The Dirt. All of these operate very similarly, where you can just look to find different campsites that were recommended by your fellow travelers. And this other screenshot here, so you can see that when you click on the moon sign, it gives you a little bit of a description that somebody took. Somebody took a couple of photos. And you can also see, usually sometimes people will say like, oh yeah, there's cell service here, or no cell service here, or like, be careful, the road is like super rutted. So it is nice to get an idea of, what to expect. But again, we still have to remember that even though this is making life easier, it could be a big part of our downfall. So I just would encourage you to use public land apps. I thought that was next, but yeah, this is another visual of iOverlander. I forgot included. So that is what it looks like on your phone. I didn't realize the screenshots from Nicaragua, so apparently it's international too. But there's different filters that you can use to find all these different resources that you're looking for. Yeah, so campsite apps, pros and cons, we kind of got through that already. It's very convenient, which is great. However, also the accuracy and the reliability is a huge con, because since these are community curated, this is not fact. We don't know these to be fact. On iOverlander now, they actually put like a warning message that says like, on every single campsite you click on, this information has to be verified. We don't know if you can really camp here. And in my time using iOverlander, the times that I have used it to find specific spots, when I will then look on my public lands maps to understand what public land that spot is actually on, there have been several times that it is private land. It is not public. And that's going to create a big issue and can be extremely dangerous situation. So that's why you don't want to rely on what other people are telling you. You want to be able to keep yourself safe and responsible, and that's why we need to rely on the public lands maps. Overcrowding and impact, again, I won't beat that horse any more than I already have. And then dependency and technology issues, like I already talked about, the over-reliance on these apps. It takes away from the journey. If you've ever looked into overlanding or anything like that, the journey is part of the adventure, and we don't want to take that away. And there's also like a lot of negative impacts. All right, so let's get into public land apps. This is the part of the session that I'm most excited to talk about, because it wasn't honestly until this year that I finally found an app that I love for finding public land. So this is kind of what it looks like on the back end. When you're traveling around, you can look to see, oh, look, the yellow is BLM land, the green is forest road. And that's how we can really understand, like, where can we legally camp here? So a few different options for you. I use Onyx Off-Road. I'm not sponsored by them or anything like that. I just genuinely love it. And it's $35 a year, so not extremely cheap, but I love all the features that it has. I might be able to show you here. Oh, no. Love all the features that it has. If you look at this screenshot that I took on the right side, you can see how, I think the screenshot was like somewhere in Idaho or something. All of the green there is national forest land. So when I click on one of the roads on the national forest, what I'm able to see is which national forest it is, and then also a description of what it's like to drive on that road. And oftentimes in the reviews, somebody might say something like, hey, like I noticed that there's a few free campsites there with the fire ring, if anybody was looking to do something like that. Not all the time. But this is such a nice way to, once you understand, like, okay, like I'm in Idaho, I'm looking at the map around me, I see there's this national forest and this national forest, and there's some roads that my van or my RV will be able to drive on. Then you can go into the Google machine and Google that national forest and see what the camping restrictions are, if there's any roads that you actually cannot camp on, and just get a full idea there. So then you can say, you know what, okay, it's time to find a new campsite today. We're going on an adventure. And I love those days. I love making my coffee in the morning, and then Zach and I will go hit the road and we just start exploring. And I cannot tell you how many times we have found the most random off the beaten path sites with views on rivers, on lakes. Like, does it take a while to find these? And is it a commitment you have to make? Absolutely. But is it worth it? 1,000,000%. So then a few other apps. Andrew, iOverlander does not have the public land info. It doesn't. So that's a big issue, in my opinion, and why you have to verify if these campsites that are community curated that people add are actually on public land. So you do kind of have to use, like, I like to kind of start with iOverlander when I'm in a new area, just to understand where the popular areas are, just so I kind of like know what I should probably avoid. But then also there may be like a couple sprinkled around there that are like off the beaten path, and you're like, oh, that's an interesting road I might want to explore to get a bit farther out. And then I go to the public land maps just to make sure that I'm fully aware of where I'm going. Gaia GPS is another one I've heard good things about. US Public Lands app is one I've recently heard good things about. It's only $4. People have said that there's not a lot of features, but all you really get is like the map. So you can actually see where the BLM land, the forest land. So if you're new to this and you want to start somewhere at a lower price point, that's probably a good place to start. And then I've also heard that the Dirt, which is one of the apps that I use to find free campsites, has recently come out with a service that provides the public land maps. So I haven't used it, but something to look into. Again, this is kind of what it looks like if you're using it on the laptop. You can see all the public land. It's Onyx Off-Road for a reason. They actually really haven't like broken into the camping space. It's more for people who are going like, off-road in their four-wheel drive vehicles. But what I love about this is not like all these roads, like most of them aren't even four-wheel drive roads. Like they show that, you can take your sedan on this, your Subaru, whatever. And then you get pictures of what the road looks like and just a better idea of what's there. Nice. Okay, so now let's talk about how to pack and prepare because there's a lot we're going to want to think about in this category. So navigation and communication is a huge thing. So you have your iOverlander. You can't download that offline, but Onyx Off-Road you can. So I would definitely recommend downloading that offline whenever you're going into an area because the reality of getting off-road like this is that oftentimes you don't have service. So I actually invested in Starlink about a year ago because I work remotely and it made sense. But before that, and even now, I still do this, is I download offline maps on maps.me. And then also I use Google Maps offline. So I just like the redundancy there. And then, yeah, Andrew, good that you have the Garmin Tread because emergency communication devices and like locator beacons are very good to have here too. When I first hit the road, we were kind of like going, like we're from Massachusetts, so we went to New Hampshire, we went to New York, visited some family in Kentucky, and then all of a sudden we decided to drive down to like the tip of Texas to Big Bend, where you are, if you've never been to Big Bend before, it is like 300 miles with no service, one gas station. And then we went even like 20 miles further into a wildlife management area down there to camp on the Rio Grande. And when I came back to service, my whole family was like, girl, you are getting a satellite communication phone. Like, absolutely not. Are you ever doing that again? So it's an important thing to keep in mind. Safety items, this is kind of a personal thing for a lot of people, like what items you want to take for your own safety. So I'll leave that to you. But something important is, again, the bear spray and bear territory. Always have that. And then, of course, a first aid kit and fire extinguisher. Always have that. Just in case items. So I wanted to include these because I really enjoy having them. I actually think that, a spare tire and a jump starter like a Halo could be included under safety necessities. But yeah, always have a spare tire or at least like a tire repair kit. And then a jump starter like Halo. I actually meant to grab that on my car. I forgot. But it basically is just like a little box that you can use to jump start your battery if your car dies. Of course, again, this might be like a necessity, but I like to have at least 3 to 7 days of spare food and water if I'm going off grid. So this can be like canned foods, having like an extra like 5 gallons of water or whatever it is. It really depends on how far off grid you're going and if you're not going to have service or whatever it is. But just important things to think about when you're going off grid. And then I did remember to grab this because we had a power outage the other day and I had to use this. But having backup power when you're camping is also something I really like to do. So this is it's a portable power station. This one is by Anchor. It's the Anchor Solix. I just love to have this when I'm camping because I have solar panels that I can attach to it. And it's just a really good way of ensuring like you always have power no matter what. And it's like, as long as you have access to the sky, you're going to be able to have more power if the worst is to happen. So that thing's my best friend. Research, again, feel like I'm beating a dead horse here, but it's just so important to research the regulations of the area that you want to camp in. Yes, and practice how to repair a tire. Plugging a tire is not always easy. No, yes, we've been there. Okay, research. So again, always know the regulations of the area you want to camp in. I also like to look just like after I know all the regulations and the rules and if there's a fire ban or if there's like a water, like we've camped on like rivers where it wasn't safe for like dogs to go in because there was like an algae issue. Just know everything you're getting yourself into. And then I also like to just look up like in forums or on Reddit if anybody has camped there, has any recommendations for camping there, or even like safety things. If people say like, hey, that area is sketchy or something like that, there's not always that information out there, and you can always trust your gut once you get there if you feel safe. There's been very few times that I didn't feel safe at a campsite, especially when you're going out as far as we are and really, going on an adventure to get there. And then also just making sure that if there are any permits, you need to camp in that camping area. Also very rare that I've come across that, but sometimes there is. So just make sure you're looking into that. And yeah, okay, final thoughts. So I included in here, I am not exactly sure how to do this to share out this deck afterwards to everybody who tuned in. So I might see if somebody can help me with that. Um, but if not, please feel free. I'm going to put my email at the end. Feel free to email me if you want this entire slide deck. I can share that with you. But I just kind of put step by steps, like what to do to find free campsites and like my process. Like I want to know like what I'm looking for. If it's like 2-wheel drive accessible road, if it's cell service, if it's privacy, if I want to make sure I have a toilet or whatever. And then like going through the whole steps of the whole thing. So this is just good for when you're getting started. And then, yeah, my last, I guess what I'll leave you with is, again, remember, leave no trace. Remember the responsibility that comes with finding these campsites, and try to encourage, the people that you're camping with or anybody you know that finding these free campsites is part of the adventure. And I really enjoy getting off the beaten path, and it's not that hard. It's really not. So yeah, go explore, spread the love. And yeah, so I think I've seen a few things dropped in here, not necessarily questions, but a few good points that some people made were, yeah, getting a national park lifetime pass is a great thing to do, especially when you're going out here and on the road. If you're a senior, $15, that's awesome. I think I pay like $90 a year for my national park pass. And also remember that when you're camping near a national park, there are a lot of areas on iOverlander that get pretty crowded, and it can feel like, oh yeah, since I'm near a national park, like it's just gonna get crowded. That's all it is. It is not true. I encourage you to really look at the public lands around national parks. There's a lot of public land around national parks. And sure, it may not be the location that's gonna be 15 minutes from the entrance, but if you're willing to go 30 minutes from the entrance, you can really get out there and be a lot more responsible with your free camping. Also, someone else asked if it's legal to fly drones on national forest land. I'm actually not sure. The first thought I have is probably no, but I would definitely look it up. It might vary by each national forest. Same with BLM land. So that's definitely something to look into. There's actually a lot of rules and regulations around drones out there. Somebody asked, how do we get the steps? So I'm not sure how to share this deck with everybody who tuned in. I will ask somebody who is organizing this event, but I'm going to leave my email right here. So if you want this slide, please email me and I will respond with it for now until I can figure out how else to get it to you. But yeah, please feel free to email. And if you have any follow-up questions, but yeah, with that said, does anybody else have any questions about camping, van life in general, anything like that? It sounds like the drone question was answered, that you can fly drones in national forest, but not for wilderness. So yeah, I'll stay just for a few more minutes and see if there's anything else. But yeah, please feel free to like follow along for the adventure. My life is a bit of a mess sometimes, but I tend to explore some pretty cool places. Oh, that's a really good question. So East Coast. Oh, thank you so much. I'm so glad that you found it helpful. East Coast question, is there something equivalent to BLM land? I actually have not come across any BLM land out here, but I have come across a variety of free camping areas. So again, in New Hampshire, White Mountain National Forest, if you're looking for free camping, start with national forests, I'd say, on the East Coast, because there's more of that. Also, wildlife management areas, especially down south, I found a few different free camping options that were on wildlife management areas. I would definitely recommend, if you wanted to start just like exploring what public land is around you, looking at that app that I had shared a couple slides ago, like I think it was called like the Public Lands app or something like that. I'll go back to that in a minute just so we can be sure. But I would start there because genuinely it really varies on the East Coast, because there are all these like weirdly specific like national seashore or whatever it is like that. So once you know that the public land is there, that's when you can then dig in. Like I lived here for years. I've been growing up going to the national forest for hiking and camping. Never did I know that there was free camping there until I looked it up. And then you can start seeing that there is some stuff out there. So I, yeah, definitely do research and look at those apps. Um, uh, oh, I'm so glad you guys found that helpful. Thank you so much for saying that. And have I been to Canada? I am actually going to Canada this weekend for the very first time. I've never been to Canada before, but I do know that all of these tools basically work the same thing for Canada. Onyx Off-Road is in Canada. Yeah, so I'm going to basically be using it in the same way. I've already kind of familiarized myself with the public lands. I'm going to Nova Scotia. So very excited for that. But I have a big dream to go all across Canada someday. Oh, thank you so much. Advice, or how has it been traveling with a 30-year-old vehicle? It's been great. It's been like so basically I came back to Massachusetts for a couple months. I'm house sitting right now and just like reconnecting with family because it's been 2 years since I left. We left with the Galaxy, and I was fully expecting the Galaxy to blow up in like the first 5 minutes of our trip because it's 30 years old. But there's been no problems whatsoever. But it's a diesel Toyota engine, and it's run like a charm. We did have to get a turbo because we went like 40 miles per hour on the highway. Long story short, that got fixed. But yeah, I think we change the oil like once a month and are very careful with it. But yeah, it's been great. And let's see. What advice can you give about trying to find campsites for campers that are two-wheel drive? My van has got stuck many times. Thank you for mentioning that. I meant to include this in the presentation. It definitely helps to have high clearance. It definitely helps to have four-wheel drive. I would definitely recommend downloading Onyx Off-Road to get comprehensive reviews of these forest roads and these BLM roads. Because people are going to be honest on there. If they say it is a four-wheel drive road, there are ruts, there's sand or whatever it is, they're going to be honest that you probably shouldn't take that road. But by going on these sites, I also camp in a minivan. So for most of the summer, I was actually solo in a minivan, like going on my own adventure. It was just something I wanted to try. And very low clearance. Like we call her a highway princess. She's not meant to be on the back roads. So Onyx Off-Road, I really relied on that to make sure that I was being safe. I also went to Baja last winter, and I'm not sure if Onyx Off-Road works down there. That's a bit harder with all the sand and just like the soft dirt down there. But having like the max tracks and all that kind of stuff is probably the best thing you can do. But yeah, I definitely like revert to Onyx Off-Road for that. Apps for ridding trails. I actually love all trails. If you're meaning hiking trails, if you mean like off-roading trails, I'd say Onyx Off-Road. But for hiking trails, I really love all trails. I actually use that a ton because I have a reactive dog and I like finding lower traffic trails. So that's what I use all trails for. But also, if you like just like walking in nature, go to BLM land or forest roads. 90% of the time, I'm walking my dog in the middle of nowhere, all alone for miles in these beautiful areas. And I have the whole freaking place to myself, and I'm just like on the road, because there's nobody out there. And yes, Andrew had a good point. Another like almost necessity, I'd say, that is really good for the person who asked. Joyce, find campsites for campers that are two-wheel drive. Yeah, having an air compressor. We have one on board, and even with four-wheel drive, especially in Baja, we were constantly letting air out of our tires, just to make sure that we could get across safely. So, and that's another thing that really helps get traction and all these other things. Sweet. All right, everybody. I guess if there's no more questions, if anybody wants to like slide one in real quick, I'll answer it. If not, please feel free to email me, follow me on the socials. Feel free to message me with anything that comes up. I'm really passionate about helping people discover nature because I had a few rough years before I started van life where I really was disconnected from nature and the things that I love. And I found so much joy getting outside and discovering all these beautiful places. So I really love to help other people do that because I know that it can really change your life. Thank you so much for like the kind words. And I think I'm going to sign off now. I hope everybody has a lot of fun out there. Hope to talk to you soon. Bye.